Governor Pritzker will deliver the state of the state and budget address today in Springfield. In October, the governor's office of management and budget estimated a $2.2 billion deficit for fiscal year 2027, which begins July 1st. Our political reporter Craig Wall will be there and have live reports for us later today on Eyewitness News.
Folks, it is February 19th, 2026. Welcome to another live broadcast of the Cole Memo. Earlier this week in the last episode, we broke down what you might expect in the governor's budget address. In today's episode, we are going to be joined by State House reporter Jeremy Gorner from the Chicago Tribune to recap what we saw in today's budget address from Governor Pritzker. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We are live right now, so feel free to call in and comment. We can display your comments on screen. We go live every Tuesday at 7:15 p.m. Central Time, where we take callers, take your comments, and talk about the latest in drug policy and Illinois cannabis news. So be sure to tune in the future at colememo.com/live. Once again, we'll be live this Tuesday and every Tuesday, unless announced otherwise. Once again, that's colememo.com/live. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
So I'm sitting back down with Jeremy Gorner from the Chicago Tribune. You know, it's nice this time of year, Jeremy. Like you said, we get teased a little bit with warmth, but one thing is for sure, the sun is still up past the hour of 5, and I'll rejoice at that. Thanks for sitting back down with me today.
Thank you, Cole. Yeah, sorry I didn't make myself available earlier. It's actually a little past 6 and it's getting dark, so. You know, but the light was nice while it lasted today. Yeah. We are still in winter, so there you go.
Indeed, but the joke I was making is that we'll be bumping up time here soon, and I'm just excited for summer. So,
yeah.
Nonetheless, thank you for sitting down with me after a busy day, and let's dive right into it. Last week, you joined me to talk about what we might expect from the governor's budget address. Tell us, what did we see during the governor's budget address and state of the state address? I should say it's a combined address.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we saw a lot. A lot of what we saw, Cole, yesterday from the governor is, I think, what we expected, or at least what I expected anyway. You know, he was trying to really cast Illinois as a bulwark against President Trump, and to argue for an affordability-focused response to the White House's often retributive economic moves against Illinois and other Democrat-led states. You know, Pritzker, obviously, you know, he's seeking re-election. He's considering running for president in 2028. And, you know, he talked about the Trump administration's funding cuts, how they're affecting Illinois, and he mocked them in his speech as proclamations from the Lollipop Guild, you know, Wizard of Oz reference there, saying these cuts, you know, have cost Illinois taxpayers $8.4 billion. This is everything from healthcare, education, you know, SNAP benefits, you know, for low-income people, you name it. It's crossing a number of different sectors, according to the Pritzker administration. And so he talked about the threat of the uncertainty of federal funding from the Trump administration, you know, this year and going into the future, basically. But the spending plan, it's a proposed $56 billion spending plan this year for the state of Illinois, but for the proposed state of Illinois budget. It's roughly about the same as it was last year, a little bit higher. This The current budget we're in is a little over $55 billion. But basically, with this new proposal, the governor is proposing that the budget be balanced with the help of $649 million in tax increases and some tweaks to tweaks to some of these taxes, or perhaps some new taxes. For example, one of the biggest changes that the governor is proposing deals with a new social media tax or fee, depending on who you talk to. That would be based on a number of users that those big social media platforms have in Illinois. And the Pritzker administration says that could bring in probably around $200 million, and that would be focused on K through 12 education, basically.
And it's an interesting source of revenue because with most taxes that people might come up with, it's like it gets between maybe yourself as a consumer and the business, and it might increase the transaction. But social media, for the most part, is free. And I guess what I'm saying is, it almost feels like this is a tax that almost nobody will oppose. Of course, maybe the social media companies. But,
right, exactly. And it also sounds somewhat ideological, because when you think of big social media companies, when you think of a company like Facebook, as we've seen, Mark Zuckerberg has become increasingly aligned with President Trump. And so it just it almost furthers the idea with Governor Pritzker that, Pritzker's been looked at as one of Trump's most ardent critics among Democrats nationally, right? He's gotten national attention from, national Democrats because of that. So, this almost furthers that a little bit, especially when his office basically released, what their rationale was for this social media digital platform fee. They said, as big tech companies continue to profit off of surveilling youth, creating addictive algorithms, and abandoning their responsibility to keep kids and consumers safe, the American public is paying the price. From negative psychological impacts on youth to consumer scams on the elderly, state governments are bearing the societal costs of irresponsible tech. So that was the justification for wanting to implement a tax like this, and on these social media companies. In addition to that, Pritzker's proposing at the state's 15 casinos to raise taxes on post-payout revenues from table games like craps, blackjack, roulette, to match the rates charged for slot machines. And the projection there is that could bring in an additional $120 million. And then, Pritzker's also got a plan that would generate another $269 million by extending a cap on how much corporations can deduct from their state taxes for operating losses. That's kind of a complicated structure, how that's set up.
Yeah.
And then an additional $60 million in revenue would come from reducing the percentage of the state's income tax dollars that are passed on to local governments, which is something that which is obviously something that local governments, suburban mayors are probably going to not be happy about. That's called the Local Government Distributive Fund. And what that is it's a pool of money that the state provides each year for cities, towns, and villages across Illinois. During Governor Pat Quinn's years, so this was 2009, I believe, to 2015, somewhere in that period, it was around 10%, and then it got lowered, I believe, under Quinn to around 6%. In recent years, it's increased a little bit to, I think it ended up at 6.47%, but now they're proposing lowering that a little bit to still lowering that pot of money, still above 6%, but lower than the 6.47%. And why that's significant is, the suburbs and these small towns use that money to pay for, I don't know, if a town, I guess, wants to hire more police officers, or more, they want to repair a faulty fire engine, or they want more squad cars, or they want to repair sewers, you name it. These small towns and suburbs, rely on that money. So that's something that could be impactful there. So that's really kind of what we were looking at. But, he's also, the governor also proposed a couple of, this is not really tax related, but he's encouraged more affordable housing. That's kind of the thing with this, this proposal to make tax increases and tax tweaks is this is under the backdrop of a theme of affordability. And I believe the quote is, and I'm paraphrasing, is America's become too damned expensive. He said something like that during his speech.
Several times.
Yeah. He also wants to encourage more housing. He's come up with a proposal that would limit local government's authority on residential zoning. This would allow more duplexes, four flats, and other multi-unit buildings, on more properties, basically. And this is obviously something that Republicans and I think some local governments have already spoken out against, because they don't want to lose control of residential zoning in their jurisdictions. They don't want the state to take that over, which is how some of these opponents see that. So we'll see how that plays out. There's already been a handful of bills that have been filed related to that proposal. And then, the governor is also resurrecting plans that lawmakers failed to endorse from last year's speech that he made, to ban students' use of cell phones in schools. And then another one so that was kind of a big one. So it's still kind of unclear to me how that is going to be different than than the failed effort from last year. Among other things too, he's really pushing he also pushed in his speech for homeowners insurance companies like State Farm to lower their insurance rates. And he's pushing for a bill that would give the state more power to implement rate review for what the state would view as excessive or unfair rate increases for homeowners insurance. This was a bill that went into veto session. It was called in veto session. It passed the Senate, couldn't pass the House. It needed 60 votes. It only got, I believe, 56. And, but the House says that they are poised basically to call it again. But so we'll see what happens. We'll see if, there could be more, because, the Democrats control the House and Senate. We'll see if there's going to be enough Democratic support this time to move a bill like that over the finish line. So that was kind of the gist of a lot of, what the governor spoke to during his speech, which lasted a little over, I don't know, about 45 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say about 45, 50 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to make it, because you just spoke about and you referenced what he spoke about, the many different ways in which he tried to address the topic of affordability, whether that be through housing or lowering insurance rates, or, like you say, supporting that legislation to allow the state to do rate reviews. Quick question, and then I had one other thing that he mentioned that I heard other people in the media may have been surprised about. And then we'll start to close out maybe with a little bit of Bears talk and stuff. But just a question on the ban of the use of the cell phones in class. With this, I'm just a little confused about this, because when I went to school, that's when kids really, I feel like that's when you started to see an explosion of kids having cell phones. Not to date myself here, but our school just took our phones away, and so I guess my question is. Would it give schools the legal clearance to do that? Because technically, I guess if I think about it, that's like taking property. Is like that what it would do, like to give them the clearance of liability? Or I'm not sure how far. I'm just curious because I've heard him, like you said, mention that in the last 2 budget addresses, and I'm like, my school had this problem solved.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that, one of the issues that came up last year, if I recall, I mean, I didn't cover it like some of my colleagues at the Tribune did, and other news outlets as well. A big concern was this idea that the cell phones wouldn't have been allowed during classroom instruction. You could still bring them in the school, but you would have to lock them up. But what if, God forbid, the school is under attack or somebody comes in to try to do harm to students? I think that there was this idea that, well, students should have, these phones with them for security reasons. I think that was a concern from opponents of the idea. Yeah. But at the same time, the proponents are just like, they're too much of a distraction. And, we've also heard about cyberbullying. You could, because of the internet, you could have interactions with anybody for any reason now. And, a big conduit for that are cell phones. So obviously the academic community wants kids to focus when they're in class. So it's about casting the right balance, I guess. According to the proposal released from the governor's office, these phones would be banned for the entire school day with the following exceptions. The school must allow exceptions, and I'll read them to you, Cole.
Sure.
When a medical professional determines that the possession or use of a wireless communication device is necessary for the management of a student's health care, to fulfill an individualized education plan or 504 plan, when the device is necessary for students who are English learners to access learning materials, participate in class, or otherwise facilitate communication, and when a student is a caregiver and is routinely responsible for the care and well-being of a family member. Schools may choose to allow exceptions. Schools would have the choice to allow exceptions for high school students to access their phone during the lunch period in the event of an emergency or in response to an imminent threat, like we were talking about, or when a teacher or instructor has authorized the student to use a cell phone for educational purposes, such as, Chromebook use, technology-based activities, etc. So yeah, I don't know chapter and verse how this differs from last year.
Yeah.
But clearly, there are plenty of scenarios where a student would be permitted to use their phone in classes I just laid out. But yeah, for whatever reason, it just didn't make it through the legislature last year. We'll see what success it has this year.
Yeah. I think really the answer to my question is this would give schools like the legal power to, lay down those rules.
It would give them the legal power to lay down those rules. It would give them discretion. It would give them the legal power, but it would also set guidelines for the schools too, like that they have to, as I just mentioned,
sure.
That they have to pass. But yeah, you're right. It would do both.
I guess because I was like, what stopped? Why was my school able to do it? But I guess I could have, if I really wanted to, made a big deal about it and been like, this is my property. And if they didn't have state law to back them up on it, like, you know what I mean? That's really my question. But anyways, didn't mean to devote too much airtime to that. I was just curious because it's come up a few times and I'm just like, again, I was like, it seems like it's a problem that's been solved by just teachers being like, hey, put that up or I'm going to take it,
Well, I guess, to your point, and I guess, it's a very interesting issue. Look, there was a time where Illinois first tried a ban on cell phones in schools in 1990. And this was through a bill. It was sponsored by former state rep Mary Flowers, who, as you know, she was in the legislature for a very long time, up until I believe last year or 2 years ago. They were, at the time they were rare, they were expensive, but the ban was aimed at addressing concerns, over drug deals being negotiated on phones. I mean, this was during the time of the crack epidemic in the United States. The ban was rescinded, though, in the early 2000s with a law that allowed public school districts, to set their own rules on cell phone use. And this was an initiative that Flowers and many others supported after the Columbine high school shooting in Colorado. I believe that was in around 1999, 2000, and then the 9/11 attacks. So, as I mentioned, I think that lawmakers had to be educated on really learning the hard way about, depending on who you talk to, after witnessing, tragedies in this country, to kind of rethink, some of their, some of these policies because of horrible things that happen in this country.
Yeah. I'll try to keep my last two questions around budget quick so we can wrap up with Bears. Were you surprised at all about the mention of nuclear energy? I know Illinois is like one of the largest producers of nuclear energy, and it's something we kind of briefly mentioned, the sort of give and take of needing more energy as we transition to clean energy. Were you surprised at the mention of sort of leaning more into nuclear energy in the budget / state of the state address?
I thought it was very interesting. I mean, surprised is kind of it's kind of tough to say that, just because, look, Governor Pritzker has had high hopes for, we saw this with CEJA a couple of years ago, wanting to essentially do away with coal and natural gas, fossil fuels in the next 20, 25 years, and replace that essentially with, clean energy sources like wind and solar. And, in nuclear power, I mean, there was a moratorium, I believe. I believe the nuclear power plant moratorium was also a result of this, or it came around that time. So they basically, this new law that passed during veto session essentially repealed the nuclear moratorium, so they could build some new nuclear facilities. I think what's happened, as we've seen in the last couple of years since CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, passed, is we've seen an explosion of these data centers that are being built through the advent of AI technology, and that's eating up so much power on the electrical grid, where it's raising electric bills for consumers. And Republicans did not vote for this bill during veto sessions. You have Democrats and Republicans each saying to each other that Democrats saying this is going to lower electric bills, Republicans saying no, it's going to increase surcharges on monthly bills. This was in veto session, but now with the governor appears to be doubling down and allowing for more leeway for nuclear power to make a comeback. And to me, it was really just trying to cast the right balance. If he's going to have a theme of affordability and cost of living, and that's, energy costs, electric bills are a baseline. I mean, think about it, Cole, when you pay for utilities, it's electricity, heat, water, that when it comes to affordability, those are like the main things. So right. I guess he did that as an attempt to maybe try to meet Republicans in the middle, if you will. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see how that all plays out, because again, with these data centers, and I believe he wants to put a pause on these tax credits too for these data centers, which was another thing I believe he discussed. And wanting the actual these data center companies to really pay their fair share because of the explosion in these electricity costs. So it seems like the governor's really trying to cast the right balance here on this issue, because it is central to his affordability theme.
Yeah. And as promised, this is my last question. It comes from a layman who's starting to get a grasp on things. I think that's the best way to preface this question. I just wonder, as there's many different policy discussions heading into this legislative session. As you said, there's of course an election coming up, and then national elections on the horizon. Many people are talking about a prospective run for Governor Pritzker, and I just wonder, like, with people that are involved in different policies, is like now more than ever a time that you have, for lack of better words, leverage. In other words, Governor Pritzker is going to want to run and not have any squeaky wheels on Illinois policy. It's like at a layman view, I see that as like now is the time, to like really apply pressure and push what you want through. But on the other hand, again, as we acknowledge, there's an election, and I think you said last week people might be less likely to take sort of, maybe it wasn't you that said this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but people might be less likely to sort of take leaps on proposals, because they're campaigning and trying to make sure that they keep their jobs. Your thoughts on sort of that little
Sure.
idea that I put out there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, Cole, what you just touched on is pretty general when it comes to elections, to an election year. I don't think lawmakers are in Illinois are going to want to rock the boat too much on these big policies going into an election year. I mean, I'm sure that when we see these tax increases or tweaks to tax code, as I mentioned, the $649 million, as you've seen, that's actually not as much as we've seen in past years in past budget proposals from Governor Pritzker. And it's also on stuff that, it's also on things that not everybody partakes in. Like, we're not seeing any broad-based tax increases here, God forbid for the governor, especially in an election year. But I mean, I think just in general, like in an election year, you're generally not going to see the legislature take on, big ticket items. I mean, in veto session, a few months ago, they got a lot done. They got that energy package done that I talked about, really, kind of repealing the nuclear moratorium, but also at the same time giving more room for wind and solar, all because of the advent of AI-based data centers. And then they got the transit bill done, so there's more funding going to Chicago area mass transit. I know that's much to the chagrin of downstate communities because some of that money was shifted from funds that are used for road construction, and it also increased tolls. So that was another risky thing that I think that the Democrat-led legislature did, which Pritzker in the end supported. I mean, there was a proposal right, at the 11th hour that Democrats came up for mass transit that would have instituted a billionaire's tax and tax on digital ads that Pritzker rejected. So they had to come up with something new 24 hours later, which he eventually supported. So I think because they got so much done during veto session and it's an election year, I wouldn't really see them tackle a lot of big ticket items. And you also got to look at this with Pritzker. He's also obviously got to be careful if he wants to not only win a third term, which would be historic for a Democrat in Illinois, and if he has aspirations to be president. Look, a WGN Channel 9 Chicago poll from, I believe it was January, said that he had somewhere a little over a 50% approval rating, which when you think about it, that's pretty amazing for somebody who's been in office, who's been in office for 2 terms almost. I mean, usually by the time you're at the end of your second term, for any major office like, governor, president, whichever, your approval rating plummets. But, over 50% is pretty good, for someone like the governor who's been in office as long as he has. So he's not going to want to ruin that. And he's going to be ultra careful to not ruin that, especially at least, until November when there's the general election for governor.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hey, I think this is a good way to close. And I really am asking this question because it made me think of your former colleague, Ray Long. I read their book on it's Madigan, The House That Madigan Built. It's the title of the book by Ray Long. I'll try to put a link to that book in the show notes for folks that want to check it out. And there's a chapter on the White Sox, and obviously there's many differences setting aside the fact that we're literally apples and oranges, baseball and football. We're talking about different sports here. But my point is, from people that don't pay attention a lot to politics, they might not think that sports teams are a big deal. And it is. It's a huge deal, and I think that is an example from the past to use. And right now, this thing that's going on with the Bears.
Yeah.
I heard that there was some news out of Indiana, and things had been developing. And just give us the latest, if you will, maybe a high level of just what's going on, just because it's an interesting story.
Okay, so basically, the Indiana legislature today, through their through one of their committees, passed a bill that would essentially create an authority in northern Indiana that would pay for a sports stadium for the Chicago Bears in Hammond. Hammond is basically in northwest Indiana. Once you go east from the southernmost Chicago border, from the far south side of Chicago, once you get into Indiana, you end up in Hammond. So that's roughly a 20-minute drive from Soldier Field, which is, east of downtown along the lakefront in Chicago. And, this comes after the Bears in December had expressed desire to move to Hammond, or to move to Northwest Indiana, because they've been trying to lobby for the last couple of years in the Illinois General Assembly to get incentives to move to Arlington Heights, which is a suburb of Chicago. And so far, there have been a lot of negotiations, but lawmakers have not supported that. They've yet to come forward in Illinois to support that. So, the Bears have been kind of playing both sides here. And the Bears put out a statement after this committee in the Indiana legislature passed this bill, which would basically, I believe one of their top Republican leaders, Indiana's a red state too. That's the other thing, is that Indiana, any chance they get to embarrass a blue state like Illinois is a good day for Indiana. Republican, it's the complete opposite of Illinois in terms of politics, whereas Democrats control Illinois, Republicans control Indiana. So what you have here basically is are the Bears basically putting out a statement saying, this was a significant step in our process and looking at Northwest Indiana, and we want to do our due diligence to basically evaluate the site, to see if it's conducive for our needs as a football team, as a sports franchise. And they're still looking forward to working with Indiana officials on this. Now, go back 24 hours or 16 hours before that, whenever, the Bears were meeting in Springfield with Illinois lawmakers, for 3 hours, basically talking about legislation that would make it easier for the Bears to negotiate property tax incentives, like basically a property tax pause with local taxing bodies in the Arlington Heights area, because the Bears own the land that used to be the Arlington Heights race course, and that's where the Bears have said if they move out of the city limits, out of Chicago, they could use the Arlington Heights race course. They could build on that land. So right now it's between Northwest Indiana and Arlington Heights. And this meeting, yesterday, was about this legislation to give this property tax break, where it would help the Bears negotiate with the local school boards, local library boards, et cetera, to get a tax break, to make a payment in lieu of property taxes, is what it really is called. The Bears have said that they basically need this in order for them to have the ability to cough up $2 billion to construct the stadium themselves. In addition to that, the Bears are requesting a little more than $850 million from the state for infrastructure costs. This would include, improving highways and roads that are near the football stadium, which is what the state does for any big business that wants to move to the state.
Right.
So that's under negotiation too. And there were 3-hour talks. And then at the end, basically the Bears said, hey, we know that you have this, this property tax, this payment in lieu of taxes bill that's supposed to be called in a revenue house revenue committee in Springfield tomorrow, which is now today. Could you not call that bill because we want to make tweaks to it because there's going to be a new bill. So that hearing was canceled today, and as that hearing was canceled, the Indiana legislature did their thing and passed their bill, and then the Bears put out a statement about how they're working with Indiana officials, and it took the Illinois lawmakers by surprise, because they thought they were making progress with the Bears. So now so we'll see what happens. I mean, the Illinois lawmakers hope this doesn't derail any kind of negotiations with the Bears. They still need support from state lawmakers in Illinois who represent the city of Chicago, because there's going to be some reluctance there for a Chicago lawmaker to vote to have on incentives to allow the Bears to move to Arlington Heights or anywhere outside the city of Chicago. You don't want to be looked at as a lawmaker who voted yes on something that allowed, one of the flagship NFL franchises to move out of the third largest city in the United States, whether it's to Arlington Heights, Northwest Indiana, or wherever. So it looks like there's still a lot of work to do between the Bears and Illinois lawmakers to stave off any kind of progress that, Indiana lawmakers said that they're making with the Bears.
Yeah. This will certainly be interesting to develop. It's interesting to see the Bears essentially use the same tactic I use when I buy a new vehicle, where it's like you go to one dealership and then you get a quote, and then you go to another dealership and you're like, well, but I was talking to this dealership and they were saying that they could do this for me.
Right.
You like let them know
exactly
that you're talking to somebody else.
That's exactly what we're seeing here. And
yeah.
And the Bears, I'm sure, are approaching it in a way where they're frustrated. They've tried to lobby for the last 3 years in the Illinois General Assembly and have gotten nowhere. Now they're trying their luck with Indiana.
Yeah, like I say, I just bring it up because I think of our friend Ray Long, who I'll give a shout out to once again. He came on the show a few times to talk about Illinois history, including that story that I was referencing. So check out his book, check out those episodes. And Jeremy, I appreciate you and the work that you do. Thank you for taking the time to sit back down with us to break down the latest in Illinois politics.
Thank you, Cole. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, thank you for tuning in to this impromptu stream of the Cole Memo. I appreciate you all tuning in. I hope you're having a great Thursday. It's just past the 8:03 p.m. hour, and we had a few comments roll in. Comment below. I can acknowledge your comments before I go. Genetic Memory Farm says football, TBIs with points, and gambling. Satisfied Mind 217 says, to be fair, the Bears haven't been the most successful and bringing in tons of money, so can't blame the city/state for not working with them as openly. Here's my thing: the stadium seems fine. Now I bring that up, and some of my friends have brought up, they're like, oh, the field is uneven or whatever. It's like, get a fucking Zamboni out there. And I know that's not what a Zamboni is for. I'm pretty sure a Zamboni is like an ice machine or something like that. Just get like a fucking roll it out. There's no way. What I think Soldier Field needs, speaking as somebody who's been to Soldier Field once in my lifetime, probably like more than 10 years ago, I remember this, it needs a parking lot. I know there are like several parking lots around Soldier Field, but like it needs like a parking lot. And there can be other parking lots, other parking options, but it needs a parking lot, like where you can just like park and walk over to the stadium. Some people are probably like, Cole, there is. You're showing that you literally have not been to Soldier Field in a while. Okay. I think it was interesting. And like I said, it reminded me of that story from Michael Madigan's tenure, who is a really well-known politician here in the state of Illinois. Folks, that was the broadcast. I want to thank Jeremy Gorner from the Chicago Tribune for sitting back down with us here on the Cole Memo. Thank you all for tuning in. I saw that we had over a handful of people tuned in on YouTube, some people on Instagram and other platforms. So appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe, and share the show with your friends and family that you think might find some value in the show. And if you have any feedback for the show, if you have any ideas on how you think I might make the show better or more worth your time, do let me know. And we do have some more comments. Cannabev says the Bears don't own the stadium. The Park District does. They resod it, and then they have 3 concerts on it before a game. Well, that's a problem. And as Satisfied Mind says, yeah, the field conditions are top priority, or should be. So, yeah, that shows you how much I know about the Bears stadium. Not much. As Jeremy Gorner was saying, there's proposals to have it in Arlington Heights. They made that statement about Indiana, which the governor was asked about today. And he was pretty surprised about it. You can look up his takes online. I think some people have posted his response to that online. There was an event earlier today in Collinsville, if you're looking for it. And they were asked, because again, I think the word I've been hearing most regarding this whole situation is that the General Assembly and the governor felt blindsided on the matter. So, oh, no peace, love, and cope tonight. Dave isn't there, man. Dave is missing. Well, hey, we're taking callers. If you go to colememo.com/live, you can call in right now. We're having fun. Just got some smoke, some cantrip drink. Yeah, Cannabev, I don't know if you saw what I said to Jeremy before he went, but I was like, it seems like the Bears are just doing what I do when I go to the car dealership or something like that. Like, you get a quote from somebody, and then you ask another dealership for a quote, and then you like bring up that you got a quote from this dealership that said they would do this, and you use that as leverage to get them to go a little bit lower and give you more of what you want or whatever. And yeah, fun things, fun times. The budget and state of the state address was certainly interesting. Please let me know what you think about it. If we missed any bases, I thought a lot of what was said and covered in the address was very interesting, including that social media platform fee, or as some people are calling it, a tax. Again, I don't know anybody that would oppose it other than perhaps the social media companies themselves. But yeah. Well, folks, I appreciate you all for tuning in to the episode tonight. I hope you're all well. If you haven't already, like I said, smash that like button. And we are live every Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. You can catch the next live stream at colememo.com/live. Once again, that's every Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. Central, unless announced otherwise. Folks, thank you for tuning into the show tonight.